Thank you for kicking things off. So I'm Patrick Finch. I'm the co-founder and COO of ELECTROTEMPO. We're a software company that specializes in two fundamental aspects of the e-mobility deployment phase: projection of where, when, and how much EV charging demand there will be, and then optimization of EV infrastructure around that demand. So we're really focused on accelerating the transition by making sure that all parties have the information they need to make informed decisions. And my personal background, I've been in the energy space for about 15 years. I actually have a project finance background, so I've been focused primarily on the infrastructure side and actually evaluating the deployment of new technologies. My co-founder, Dr. Anne Zhu, has a PhD in transportation systems engineering, so she brings the transportation modeling portion of our work, and that's really the genesis of our company.
Great.
And I know I'm supposed to share a personal story, so I'm a really terrible surfer. I actually learned how to surf when I was working in the state of Hawaii, helping them develop their clean energy transition plan. So I managed to at least try it while I was there. But yeah, fun facts.
Thank you, Patrick. Gurmesh, do you wanna continue? I think you're the only Canadian company here in the panel, so maybe that's the fun fact, or no, I'll let you talk.
Yeah, perhaps. Awesome. I'm Gurmesh. I'm one of the co-founders and the chief product officer at Moment Energy. Yeah, Canadian Vancouver-based startup. I'm actually in Calgary though, in another Canadian city right now. And yeah, what we do is we support customers with reducing their electricity bills or utilities reducing the need to upgrade power lines by deploying energy storage systems. What makes us unique is that our energy storage systems are using batteries that have been repurposed from electric vehicles. So we're giving these batteries a second life and providing a more sustainable solution than traditional batteries, and still helping in these applications for affordable and reliable energy storage. Yeah, a fun fact about myself is that I've been to, I guess I'm from Malaysia and Singapore from my parents' side. Yeah.
Oh, wow, awesome, great. Evgeny. I'm doing it wrong all the time. Sorry for that.
Yeah, no problem. So thank you very much for having me here, and very nice to see everyone. I represent SHEEVA.AI, being the CEO and founder of the company. We focus on in-vehicle payments to really facilitate the transactions as well as revenue generation for various services, including EV charging, fueling, tolls, retail, parking, and the other vehicle-related applications. And we do this by using our patented precise location technology to detect the vehicle right at the point of service to enable this one-touch experience to drive more customers and to drive more use cases. I do come from Russia, like talking about the backgrounds, and based now in the United States, and having been working on this project globally, India, Japan, Europe, so really everywhere. Thank you.
Wow, great. Great to have you. Thank you. And then Jeff from VOLPOST. Do you wanna?
Yeah, hi there. This is Jeff Prosserman, co-founder and CEO at VOLPOST. We're on a mission to decarbonize mobility by democratizing charging access. And we do that by retrofitting existing streetlights into an EV charging platform. This significantly reduces the cost, the timing, and physical footprint of charge deployment in the built environment for both the public and private sector, and creating a scalable solution so we can meet our climate targets. I guess a fun fact, I started the company based in Brooklyn, and we're building the company coast to coast. But when I first purchased an EV, experienced the charging dilemma firsthand, and recognized that we needed to create a convenient and scalable solution to get everyone to go from gas to electric. So here we are today.
Great, thank you. And as you can see, we intentionally not have invited any kind of EV manufacturer. So we really want to tell a story. What else next to EVs really accelerating the ecosystem? Alex, do you want to continue with the next question?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, great to have everybody here. Excited to dig in today. So I'm going to ask a question, starting with Patrick, but we'll go around the panelists. So when you think about electric mobility, there are a lot of pieces to it, both on the hardware and the software side. And yeah, curious just from your point of view, how do those two pieces fit together, and how does ELECTROTEMPO kind of play together with both the digital and the hard tech side of the ecosystem?
So Alex, happy to kick this one off because basically ELECTROTEMPO focuses on enabling the deployment of hardware. So we see software as critical to ensuring that the hardware gets deployed where it needs to be, when it needs to be, and is scoped properly for the actual task at hand. This is pretty critical because I think everybody agrees that the hardware needs to work, right? It needs to be cost effective, it needs to be reliable, and it needs to be located where people can actually conveniently use it. And we see software as kind of driving those themes across the board. So a couple examples I can give: site utilization. If you're trying to get somebody to invest in, thousands, if not millions, dollars worth of hardware, they want to know what's going to get used. So picking where and when to put the sites in, and scoping the right number of chargers to meet demand is pretty critical. And that's what software can really help you with. It'll give you the data to make informed decisions so that you're not investing blindly. And that'll help drive the underwriting process, right? If you can project revenue streams from these investments reliably, you're going to actually yield better returns and get through the investment process faster. Otherwise, this is going to take a lot longer than people want, and there's going to be a lot of back and forth as people have bad investments blow up in their face. Which gets to the second point where software can really help. We've seen actually on the fleet side in particular, a lot of investments just not happen because they don't have the right tools to adequately optimize what investment they want to make. So they're doing these spreadsheet exercises and saying this isn't going to pencil. So why spend the money in the first place? And this is true even in the face of incentives being out there. It's because people tend to treat electric vehicle investments like they're a diesel truck or something equivalent on the fossil fuel side of things, and they're very different. So you have to factor in infrastructure costs, you have to factor in charging schedules and range limitations, and do things properly. Otherwise, you're never going to get to an acceptable return. So we see software as being able to really meaningfully help on the optimization side as well and get through the actual investment process. So
yeah,
I'll pause
no,
there.
that makes a lot of sense in terms of like once you're investing in hardware, the dollars are big, the timelines are big. Got to optimize that. Well, to jump into kind of the hardware side, Gurmesh, would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, for sure. I think hardware and software are always complementary, and I think software always needs a system to deploy on, as we've always seen. And what we've seen with Moment Energy is that like we have a battery system, but what good is a battery system if it doesn't know when to operate or where to operate or why it's operating? So we are very software dependent as well. And I think you see that in any renewable asset or any different asset in the ecosystem. So it's something that's kind of been we've had to navigate a lot. And without hardware, our company, wouldn't have the success it has, and nor would any other energy storage company today.
Great. Well, let's go back to more of the software-driven side of Evgeny. You're on mute.
Yes, of course. Sorry. So yes, of course, software is very important for multiple aspects. I mean, hardware does not work without software. That I think is what Gurmesh just mentioned. But there are different types of software too. So what Patrick was talking about is data analytics software too, which just helps you better understand and optimize and put things together. So there are so many different aspects that go into the ecosystem, which just blows one's mind as to understanding how to put all of this together. And I think all of us four here are contributing these different pieces to make sure that the whole ecosystem works, because we are on the vehicle side, right? So it's great if you make sure that you have some hardware there that enables that's essentially charging infrastructure, but then how do you activate it? How do you make it work? And then we have seen from some of the recent S&P Global surveys that 42% of charging infrastructure are failures in hardware, which essentially is failures in software because, hey, I can't activate the charger. I can't kind of unplug it. I can't put it into my car. So, and then 42% is a huge number reported by the users, which then drives EV sales down and then eventually drives climate tech down because no one switches to EVs, right? Because of all of this range anxiety and all of this, hey, where do I charge my car when I'm going on a long haul trip, right? So all of these things are really coming together. We're really putting together those different pieces where software has to really communicate well and be debugged to activate to make this hardware live. And then also bringing together the customer piece, which is even a different side of software, which is mostly what we are focusing on at SHEEVA.AI, is making sure, okay, that's great. The hardware is live. It works. How can you reliably then connect the customer to that? How can you drive the customer to the available station rather than something where there will be a line of 20 cars in front of them, right? So all of these aspects are super, super important to bring everything to life and make sure that we have efficient growth of this climate tech in the world and the US in particular.
Yep. Nope. Fully agree there. And I think, Jeff, you guys are, building EV charging infrastructure and also an app to enable customers to charge and control the experience through that. So obviously it's integrated in your view, but curious how you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, hardware and software are interconnected in the consumer experience, right? So, I mean, I'm the former director of innovation at Samsung, so I have experience taking both hardware and software platforms and IoT devices from concept to commercialization. Same thing with a few members on our team who were ex-Samsung, where we took a bunch of products to market, and really it's not one or the other. It's how they interoperably work together to create the right experience. With what we're doing, effectively have a new form factor. We're retrofitting existing infrastructure to provide that use case for curbside and parking lots. Then on the software side, have the mobile app and then the backend dashboard, which tracks the utilization per charging across the entire network with the ability to set tariffs and fees and really provide the end-to-end charging experience, both as a front-end experience to drivers, but then ultimately to our partners and the site hosts. And yeah, I mean, I think one thing in the electrification of everything, it's about interoperability and creating an open distribution strategy and an ecosystem and recognizing that we're all players within a larger system and set of networks when we're operating in public and private domain. And the more we can find crossroads where we can build those bridges for collaboration, and rather than developing everything in silos, the faster the entire sector will progress. And it's like the innovation curve of anything, frankly, that's come before it. Everything typically starts with building a lot of the same components within different silos, and then eventually there's standardization and the network effects.
Yep. Nope. Can't really pull the pieces apart here. They all got to be there. Well, over to you for the next one, Stefan.
Yeah, that's about the Inflation Reduction Act, and in our prep call, Patrick has a kind of really strong opinion about that. So I will ask you. First. So the funding is now coming in and land on a state level, right? And what do you think? How does the funding change the ecosystem and the dynamics of startups and early stage companies in the mobility area?
So first of all, I'd like to say I support the IRA. I think that it's been really helpful in driving interest in deployment of EVs, adoption of EVs. It's gotten people who never would have considered buying EVs to actually look into it. I think it's kind of a double-edged sword, though, because it's really pushing incentives on certain vehicle classes. So I can use medium heavy duty vehicles as an example. trucks, you know, the infrastructure is really not there yet, in particular on the charging side and the grid side, because when you're looking at large truck stops, for example, if you were to replace all of the fueling infrastructure with chargers, that's a huge load on the grid at a very specific point on the grid. And that takes years to try to get the infrastructure in place. So when you're throwing incentives at the vehicles, but not bringing the infrastructure along with it at an equally rapid pace, you have the potential to create these bottlenecks where people get frustrated because they've gone and, you know, looked into buying trucks, or maybe in some cases even purchased the vehicles, and then the infrastructure hasn't moved as quickly. So you have the potential to create bottlenecks where people are kind of overextended in a certain direction, and part of this ecosystem is not keeping pace. And I think we need to be careful that there's not a backlash, that people get frustrated. I think, you know, a good example is we've all heard examples of people going to a charger, not being able to plug in, or not being able to find a charger when they need it, or there's not enough chargers. They get there and there's 5 cars parked at the chargers squatting on them. You know, that creates frustration and backlash. So, you know, the whole ecosystem has to move in lockstep, or you're going to end up seeing these swings back and forth where public sentiment goes, you know, in one direction really fast, maybe driven by the incentives, and then swings back equally because things didn't go the way they thought it was going to go. And so, like, I have a bunch of examples of this, but I want to open it up to the fellow panelists, see what they think.
I don't know. Maybe Jeff, you wanna comment on this? Kind of. I was kind of Patrick. So you're saying, but you say it was useful kind of to drive awareness into the first kind of injection into the market, right? But there's just kind of a danger, kind of concern that there might, or there probably are already kind of a backlash, and people cannot really then kind of use it as they want to use it, right? And this then creates dissatisfaction, and then maybe people just say kind of this, the whole thing makes no sense, right? And,
Yeah, so I can give you a great example.
Yeah.
We work with fleets, we work with ports. You know, there's been a bunch of incentives kind of thrown in both directions, saying go buy a bunch of electric trucks. And then they find that the trucks are going to take 2 years to ship. They now have to talk to their utility company, figure out if the utility can actually help them hook up these chargers that they're considering. They then have to figure out what chargers they even want. And they don't have an organization within their business that's really set up to handle pretty much any of these questions.
Mhm.
So it then becomes a change management problem. And in California, you've now seen retrenchment, right, where they passed the Advanced Clean Fleets rule. Immediately, people said, we can't move that fast. We can't, you know, deploy the infrastructure that fast. And they're kind of going back and forth trying to figure out what the timing on that should be. But the IRA is there now. So it's driving that interest, and it's great that it's pushing the envelope and getting people to think about these problems. But at the same time, it's now revealed what the next bottleneck in the system is going to be, right? It pushed you so far, and then you hit the first wall. So that's like a very specific example, but we've seen it in many different contexts as well.
Jeff, as someone who is in the charging business, do you kind of, I don't know, is your business different now with the funding from the Inflation Reduction Act? Do you have, is it influencing your business at all?
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly accelerating when you have 7.5 billion in charging money being deployed on an annual basis over the next 5 years. And the first tranche of that, which was just announced in the last few weeks, to about 50 different municipalities. And at this point, effectively, groups are getting budget for charging for the first time in history, creating a growth inflection point, if you want to use the name, into this unique moment in history of the why now that charging is coming. Obviously, it comes with its pain points as we go from early adopters into the mainstream, like any technology. But obviously, having that funding there as an accelerant is only going to encourage others to enter the space and solve for those problems, so we can actually get to where we need to be.
And just for the audience to understand, so the money goes to the state, and from the state to the municipals, and then the cities then actually they ask you then to build these chargers. Is there really a direct purchase of your product and service?
So yeah, I mean, it's a federal program where then various municipalities would apply for funding. On an annual basis, they release the RFP. And then as a technology provider, we sit underneath that. So as different groups are awarded that funding, then we can either have relationships with certain ones where there may be procurement opportunities, but in most cases, there's a formal RFP process that will be happening this year on the back of that budget being unlocked.
Okay.
Well, we had a question come in from the audience, which actually ties into where we wanted to go next anyway. And so the next topic is around grid performance and integration for e-mobility and transportation, and how utilities are able to handle kind of what's required here. So I think, Jeff, we'll start with you on this one around what hurdles do you see out there with like integrating EVs and infrastructure into the current system, and is the grid up for the challenge?
So the short answer is it isn't today, but it needs to be tomorrow or sometime soon. In that, obviously, we need multiples of power comparative to what's on the grid in order to electrify everything, not just vehicles, but the decarbonization across every aspect of society. In regards to transportation, I mean, there's grid capacity maps that show where the power is today, and ultimately, it's not fast charging everywhere, and that those spike the grid. And obviously, we're thinking about densely populated cities. People are driving for less than 30 miles in a given day on average, having a car parked for over 90% of the time. And with that level 2, kind of that medium charge is becoming the backbone of public charging. And the utilities have understood that. So it obviously doesn't spike the demand in the same way. It's obviously also better for the car batteries to not always be fast charging, and it fits more into the use case alongside parking. So I come back to thinking about how many plugs are in the room that you're sitting in today. And if you know, then bravo. But usually recognizing that it's just a ubiquitous set of plugs in the same capacity. If we truly want to get that growth curve from 1 to 2% of cars on the road to 100% over the next few decades, we need to provide ubiquitous charging access across all aspects of society that fit into the fabric of cities. So we're filling in one aspect of that. We're fortunate to have the largest utility in the US, Exelon, as an investor in the company, as well as the largest utility in Germany, RWE, as an investor in the company. So I could say that the utilities are certainly investing in innovation and into the space because they recognize they need to in order to get to where we need to go. But it is a process. And it's a phased approach of getting people comfortable with rolling out new technology.
Yeah. Kind of curious, Gurmesh, since you're tackling kind of, the storage side of things, and obviously there's a big grid interface with that. What do you see as hurdles from your perspective?
Yeah, specifically hurdles to like DC fast charging or hurdles to deployment of storage?
Both, I think.
Both? Okay.
Because since might as well tap into the audience side.
Sure. Yeah, so I think the big hurdles that we see with DC fast charging, I think, is kind of like Jeff mentioned, is the grid's just not ready. And as much as I think the batteries are a solution, you can't deploy batteries at every single fast charging site in America and expect EVs to be continuously cheaper than gas cars. There's just a certain point where it doesn't make sense. High use, high traffic sites, batteries make a lot of sense to take strain off of the solar, take strain off of the grid. and they allow the deployment of renewable assets without extreme stress. But in order to deploy these charges, you need enough power from the grid itself, and then batteries can just be used to optimize the time of use of the charger as needed. In terms of deployment of batteries in the US, I think the biggest hurdle, a lot of people in the battery industry will shake my head for calling this out, but is the uncertainty around fire safety around batteries right now. There's so much diversity of opinion, diversity of views between authority having jurisdictions throughout America, and just understanding, that the current standards today are great, but what we need to realize is that, batteries do catch fire. It's a real thing, and we need to understand that. We need to have more honesty and transparency about the fires that have happened, with companies, having more public records of this incident, so that way authority having jurisdiction can make better and more informed decisions. One big example is the deployment of fire suppression, for example. You'd think that fire suppression, would really help support the system to reduce fire risk. But a lot of firefighters and a lot of local areas, specifically in California, have said no, fire suppression creates a higher risk for firefighters because they create a false sense of security. So now a lot of jurisdictions don't allow any fire suppression. And things like that just need to be more standardized and more understood throughout the industry, because there's such different levels of customers with different levels of experience that you need to be able to see, you need to be able to justify kind of why you took fire suppression out of your system, for example, and the reasoning behind that, and how that's actually creating a safer system. And then I think additionally, other bottlenecks behind the installation of batteries is the bottleneck that's bottlenecking DC fast chargers as well. Batteries are great, but currently how the electrical code is written, and specifically how the CEC, or the California Electrical Commission, kind of regulates the lines. You need lines that can support the battery output of the system. So to install batteries to reduce the stress on the line, you need to upgrade the line. Some rewriting of the code and some differences in permitting can make huge differences there. But regardless, that interconnection queue and the bureaucracy in California that results in these delays in these battery projects needs to kind of be solved. And I know I'm not going to nerd out too much, but I know a lot of people say FERC 2222 is a solution here, but I think it's a little bit more complex than that. And getting bipartisan support on a bill of that's ambitious and directly target states like Texas is going to be really challenging. So we need more immediate and less ambitious solutions in the meantime as well. Yeah. Sorry if I spoke in too much jargon there. Yeah.
No, some good thoughts there. Well, Stefan, why don't you jump on the next one, and then maybe we can fit the question from the audience for Patrick in after that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the next question is about AI and what is the role of AI in kind of really changing and optimizing mobility services and in total kind of for the future of transportation. And I will ask you first, Evgeny, because you have AI in your company name, so there must be a kind of connection. So if you could answer this question. Yeah,
I think it's as oversold of a buzzword as big data before, machine learning a little later, AI today. Everything is AI today. That's very clear. So anything you do on a computer is AI. But I wanted actually to tie it back to the discussions. It has been very interesting discussion so far. Even go back to IRA and others. One of the things that we see is there's really a lot of it should be driven by market forces. Unfortunately, a lot of what we see today is it's driven by government funding, which is not market force. So you have those tax incentives to buy EVs. You have a lot of these other things that come in, like including IRA, right, to support infrastructure, and really pushing the needle from the government side. But at the same time, the idea here is essentially someone needs to kind of take the bill to build it out, right? And that is where probably that will link back to this AI machine learning, actually helping to understand how it will all be building out. And some of the things that Patrick was talking about is using software to better understand where to place that hardware, like how to optimize it, and do all of this. The problem there is it still does not have a clear path to revenue. And that is where it'll just hit the wall at some point, and we don't want it to hit the wall. You know, when investors invest, like VCs, for example, they think, all right, let me invest in a trend because probably there will be consolidation at some point, right? Someone will start buying everyone else and everything will just be beautiful. It's not the stories that happened to micromobility, the e-scooters. Those guys are out completely. So it doesn't necessarily mean that if we put billions and billions and billions of dollars into something, that will necessarily work, right? I think it's very clear that EVs will work one way or the other, especially that the companies involved in that are not startups. They're big OEMs, they're big utility companies, of course. The problem that I think we want to be very aware of is it actually be a natural monopoly down the road where utilities play the game, where really all the money is being made on generation of electricity? Or is it actually going to be market driven, including the customer paying for the experience of charging and paying for the experience of driving an electric vehicle? So I think from our perspective, when we come from this side of what we do, we're really trying to create that market force behind this whole transition, because if there is no market force behind it, it's unsustainable. At some point, it will just stop. At some point, the government cannot continue dumping billions into this, right? So the market force has to be created behind this. And if we present it the right way to the consumer, if we present it saying, hey guys, we heard you, we're really figuring out the infrastructure, but we do it because we heard your problem, we heard your pain. We're really trying to position it as a solution rather than just an engineering exercise, right? It's not a national research lab here, right? It's actually the true economy out there. So I think that's what very important is, to really understand what is the market forces behind what we do. And that's where, again, AI and machine learning and software helps. That's where we are trying to do, coming from the customer, from the vehicle side, is really helping them utilize everything that is being put together. So I think that this is something important to keep in mind as we're continuing with this topic altogether.
Thank you. Should we now take the question, Alex?
Sure. Yeah. So I think this first one was directed for Patrick from Robert, around there being a tension between individual companies and the need for creating network ownership to get to scale and geographic deployment. And he was asking around, is there room for networks versus individual companies building their own charging infrastructure for their local needs?
So, great question. I spend a lot of my time working on this, so I appreciate you calling it out. But I think there is room. If you think of, on the light duty side, right? You have public charging banks paired with people having chargers at home. It works, and then you could probably make the case there's not enough public charging, right? So there's definitely room for both. What you're going to need to have is the way to exchange information rapidly. So that's effectively where we've been building out our machine learning models, actually, to see the trade-offs between home charging, workplace charging, public charging, and give people the data to say, if you put in workplace charging, here's the utilization level you can expect, the revenue you can expect. Back to Evgeny's point, like, this has to be market driven, and that's going to happen through a rapid exchange of information. So I think on the medium heavy duty side, you specifically mentioned like Prologis, they're looking at charging hubs for supply chain applications, and Terawatt as well. So effectively, you're going to have to see some sort of hybrid model where some of the larger fleets will put chargers in at their own depot for their own use, and that's probably going to be starting with the larger fleets for the most part, because it's expensive, and the installation costs and everything else to go with it requires a certain level of capital and sophistication. But for smaller fleets, which is most of the market, right, you're going to need charging hubs that can support areas where there's a lot of smaller fleets in one area. And then the larger fleets, or the larger property owners or third parties that are providing that, probably will actually come up with a hybrid model where there's some public charging for smaller fleets, and then subscription for larger fleets. So Amazon's not going to own every charger it uses. They're going to want to capitalize on the public networks, but they probably are going to want a dedicated charger or two at any given site for their own fleet so they can plan around it. And again, that's a software question: is how do you actually reserve chargers for different fleets at different times. And it's something we're, actively working towards as you get towards that density of the network. So I think the answer is yes. It's going to be a hybrid, though, again, between sort of depot charging or your equivalent to home charging on the light duty side, and then having third-party networks that you leverage to fill in the gaps. And it's essential if you ever want to get to long haul trucking, right? Because those vehicles are going very long distances. They're not going to be able to go back to the same depot and charge, unless people want to speculate on a lot of real estate to have a dedicated network nationwide or something. So that's kind of where I see things developing, but that again takes time and a lot of money.
Great. Well, I think we'll jump to our next topic, and then Stefan, you can hit the next audience question after that. So this one will start with Gurmesh on circular economy. How should hardware climate tech startups think about prioritizing recycling and secondhand usage of their products to align with the principles around circular economy? Obviously, this is very aligned with kind of the core mission of what you're doing at Moment Energy.
Yeah, for sure. I'll start with one sentence that I think people forget. If you can recall, there was 3 words we learned about recycling and environmentally friendlyism in elementary school, and it was reduce, reuse, recycle. And oftentimes, we're not doing the first 2, and we're just focusing on the recycling. With solar farms, we're thinking so much about the technology and how we're going to recycle these panels with EV batteries. We're investing billions of dollars into recycling startups and companies like that aren't quite as established, in the business models a little new, but we're not thinking about how we can reduce this as a batteries first of all, or how we can reuse them. And I think those are such critical parts of the circular economy because they allow something that would typically last 20 years, or something that typically lasts 7 to 10 years to last 20 years to 25 years. For example, with the batteries we get, sometimes they're in a vehicle for up to 7 to 10 years already, and then we can bring them into second life for another 7 to 10 years. So this lithium and these rare earth metals that can't all be recovered in recycling, at least profitably recovered in recycling right now, they're not, with saving them from entering the environment early. And a lot of these rare earth metals, can cause issues with, local nature, local flora, local, groundwater, and etc. And that's great. And then additionally, we're giving recyclers time to catch up, and we're giving recyclers, time to actually get to a point where they're profitable in their processes and they're able to use it. So I'm of belief that if there's still useful life in anything, we should find a way to use that useful life instead of recycling it or remanufacturing it into something else, because all of those are quite carbon intensive activities, and carbon's not the only consequence, the only byproduct from a lot of these activities. Like with lithium-ion batteries, sending them into landfills, we understand the CO2 consequence of that, but we don't understand the other consequences from all of these other metals leaking into the ecosystem and the issues they create. So yeah, with our company, specifically, we're focused on that reuse piece. So obviously my bias kind of shines through. But additionally, in other industries, we're seeing this throughout North America, is, like with DC fast chargers and with a lot of solar farms and a lot of large scale projects that, if they fail to essentially deploy an initial deployment, they're often being liquidated really early, and instead of being reattempted to be installed, and things like that. So, we're seeing a lot of risk around this whole circularity. And I think since a lot of these foundations, a lot of these principles, though they're based on economics, they are also based on environmental friendliness and care for the planet. And I think we need to think about that throughout its life cycle. And not just think about the CO2 it's offsetting because we're replacing gas cars. That being said, I want to be very clear that I'm of the opinion that even if end of life is not responsibly handled, I think that EVs and deployment of renewable assets is still more important. I just think that we need to also consider that end of life piece as well.
Yeah, not like the thoughtful kind of way of thinking about that. Well, Jeff, curious. Obviously, you're making EV charging hardware. How do you think about kind of the life cycle of that? Maybe it's a little early for thinking end of life and what happens, but how do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, starting with the concept of the retrofit, repurposing existing infrastructure, leveraging what's already there to reduce the footprint of charger deployment. We also don't have the construction and trenching work up front, which reduces the carbon impact effectively of getting chargers out into the wild. Then when we design the system from a platform-based approach, it's modular and upgradable. And what that means is there's 2 chargers for the curbside configuration and up to 4 for parking lots, 1 on each side of the unit. That modularity enables us to have new units effectively as things get faster and cheaper over time, as well as provide additional services from a data perspective to public and private partners. But it also allows us, when you're thinking about the whole reduce, reuse, recycle, circular component of this, when certain markets or certain contracts come to the end, if they're not renewed, we can actually remove an asset and repurpose it to another customer and ultimately not have any damage to the existing infrastructure in removing it very quickly and repurposing it. So we are thinking about every step of the way, not just putting a piece of hardware into the built environment and then ultimately creating more waste and a larger footprint, but every step of the way how to maximize the value and reduce the effort or the carbon impact holistically across our life cycle.
Oh, impressive stuff. Love it. Oh, back over to you, Stefan.
Yeah, I think we only have 8 minutes left, right? So I think we do the question. So the question is how to incentivize additional retail transactions around the downtime EV charging experience. Who has the best answer for this question?
I am happy to kick this one off if you'd like, because this is something we discuss frequently with our utility customers, right? Being able to send price signals to the market, encourage behavioral shift, so curve flattening to avoid peaks. I think part of it's an informational issue, right? So utilities are exploring a lot of different options for new rate designs and incentive programs that send, price signals or demand side management signals to the market and let people enroll and actually participate. I think there's a question of how do you get to scale with that, which is a tricky one. So you're probably, again, going to have some sort of software to allow people to get those signals in real time. So that's going to possibly be day ahead. I mean, they do this on the built environment side all the time, right? Building owners or tenants know tomorrow's going to be a high temperature day. If I'm in a program, I'll get incentivized to shut off my air conditioning early. And they'll probably have to have a similar signal drivers to know, okay, if you charge later today, you're going to get a better price. And I think Tesla's already experimenting with some of this. So I think, frankly, this will get negotiated once it gets to the commercial sector and it's the supply chain. You're talking about megawatts of peak demand at any given point, to deploy those programs. So I think there's a large role for the utilities in this, and then there's also going to have to be some sort of signaling software element that allows people to take advantage of those price differentials.
Yeah, I would just add that ultimately right now it's done in a very blunt, rudimentary way, because just of where we are in the evolution and the amount of cars on the road that are charging from a utilization perspective. But ultimately it's going to move into dynamic pricing, and the back-end tooling obviously is just not there, frankly, fully built out and fleshed out. That's why the integrated network approach, the interoperability between different providers and how they connect to that broader data set to inform what the pricing should be, is where things will head in the next few years. But right now, going back to that silo-based approach, everyone's kind of building the different cog of the network, and in a couple of years it will actually be more dynamic, similar to the way gas prices or flight or hotel is dynamically priced today.
So it sounds like it might be a new idea for a startup, right? Kind of having yeah, we are relatively at the thank you, relatively at the end. So we have a last question: advice for founders. I don't think that we can make this question today.
Stefan,
with
I'm
5 minutes,
seeing a question in the chat that's about O&M models that I don't know if it was raised earlier. Did we cover that one?
We talked a bit
Maybe.
about the DC fast charging, but if anybody has comments on O&M, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't do the O&M ourselves, but I think I've seen a few companies that are actually attempting to come up with different alternatives for this. I think this is ultimately driven by utilization. So where we've seen some of the biggest fails, so those horror stories that's in the second half of the question, is when chargers are not maintained because they're not being used and the owner doesn't have a reliable revenue stream. So what's the incentive to keep that charger functional, right? And they defer maintenance until it's too late. So I think part of it is going to be proactively moving forward for each additional charger that's added, making sure it's in a high utilization area so that regular maintenance can just occur without any sort of crazy innovation needed, right? But I've seen like folks that are really proactively trying to train service providers for chargers. That's something that I think is critical. There's just not enough trained staff to do this. And you know, there's some clever financing stuff that's out there, but maybe some of the other people on the hardware side have a better idea on like how they handle that.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that on like large scale deployments of chargers, I've seen, Jeff, feel free to correct me if you think I'm wrong on this, but I've seen that they're kind of starting to chase that renewable model of essentially having trained staff that kind of go over a general area on the large scale deployments. But when you're installing a level 2 parking lot and charge in a parking garage, you're not going to be able to afford having an O&M contract that spans 20 years with that project. So I think right now it's, you know, the large scale DCFCs, the O&M isn't as big of a problem with those as it is with the smaller chargers. And that's also been my experience driving EVs around California and etc. Is that the DC fast chargers recently have started to be have higher operating rates, but the level 2s and level 2 chargers in the random wall parking lots aren't necessarily always functioning. But you know, this is just a little anecdotal, not data driven. So feel free to correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think we all have. Yeah, sorry.
I could just add that a lot of the charging companies 1.0 from a decade ago just didn't build it into their business model to actually have the servicing. And from lessons learned with business model innovation and recognizing the need for reliability and maximizing uptime, you have to kind of build that into the model upfront when you're selling or servicing chargers and not just look at it as an afterthought. And in doing so, it's not a perfect magic wand solution. There's a lot of subcontractors, a lot of different groups you have to engage in order to provide that high quality of service. But it is something we're all striving toward across the sector.
Yeah, just to close the loop on that, since I think we have like 2 minutes left. Standardization is going to help with this. So as you have fewer models of chargers that need to be maintained, it's going to be easier to train technicians, which means you're going to have better, more reliable service across the board. So kind of an indirect, I guess, way of saying the people that are pushing standardization are going to really help with this, even if they're not directly trying to do that.
Great, thank you. I think we really need to come to the end now, even if we have questions left. So I would suggest that we handle the question offline. So I will send you the question, and then you will write something, and then we publish it so that we don't lose this question and your insights. But yeah, thank you to the audience, and thank you to the panelists. That was really insightful and interesting. And yeah, we will share the recording on the YouTube channel. Yeah, I would say thank you for your attendance. And
thank you, everybody. Thank you, Stefan and Alex.
Thank you for having us.
Have a good day.
Cheers.
Yeah, thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody. And thanks for all the engaged questions from the audience.
Yeah.
Good discussion.
Bye.